Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of three amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa the second, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're blessed to always be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport, who will join us later because we are bringing back Sham on today's episode. So today's episode, we're going to talk some Detroit basketball. We're going to talk Detroit Pistons, Omari. It's been a little bit rough. And so we're actually just going to do one segment because you know what? It's our podcast and we can do what we want with it. So we're going to go a segment of Pistons. We're going to go a segment of March Madness, maybe talk about NBA draft, that type of stuff. And then we are going to play Sham with Wes. Real quick, Omari, we did get a new review. This is from R Music 33. Great Pistons pod. Great pod on the Detroit Pistons. Both hosts give solid opinion, while Omari provides some inside information from covering the team as a beat writer. Highly recommend if you're a Pistons sports fan. So again, guys, we always appreciate those. They help us grow. They help us reach a wider audience. If you're listening, watching on YouTube, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, all of that stuff so you always know whenever we go live. And then Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to, again, leave a rating, leave a review. If you leave a review, we will definitely read it here on the pod. With that said, Omari, what's going on? How you feeling better? I know you've been under the weather a little bit.
Yeah, I was kind of fighting something for like a week, baby. And it's just one of those things where it's like so mild, you don't even think about it most of the time. And I ended up taking like one sick day on like an off day a couple of weeks ago, and I was feeling better. And then it just hit me all of a sudden like late last week. So I ended up covering two home games from home. I think the game Sunday and then the game Friday as well. And then obviously they were on the road Monday against the Knicks, and I wasn't in New York either. So I've been away from the team for a few days, but it just kind of happened at a time where I get sick right when the team kind of shuts everybody down anyway. So they're we're going to talk about Jaden Ivey. He's like probably the only core guy in the entire rotation right now. And I probably haven't missed a whole lot. This is like the perfect time to get sick this time of year. So I'm feeling like better now. I'll say I'm like 90% now. So I'll be good by the time I will be in DC this weekend. So the goal is just to get right before that.
Omari, give us the pros and cons of a beat writer not being able to make the game. Like, and you do this, right? Like there's times for people who don't know, there's times you don't travel, but in general, you make almost every home game. So just give us the quick, like, I think there's some obvious ones, but for anybody who doesn't completely understand your job, this is an episode we have time to hatch this out.
Yeah.
What are some pros and cons of not being at the game in attendance in person?
Yeah, I mean, from a job standpoint, I'd say there's probably only cons. You're not doing pregame with coach. You're not doing postgame press conferences. You're not in the locker room after. You're not watching the game live, so there's stuff you miss. And then so much of my job is just talking to people, and you can't really do that either. You're just at home sick, so you miss out on like a lot of the job. I talked about it on here before, but like that COVID year where we did everything from home, it was just I feel like I was doing a fraction of the job that first year because I couldn't go to the actual arena and do anything. So it's just like an easier night. Like maybe the only pro is just that I'm not working to the same extent, so I'm just not doing as much. But at the same time, I was sick, so it's like I'm at home sick. I'm not just chilling. It felt weird. Like I don't like missing games. Like I probably end up missing a couple every year just because of something. And this is probably the latest I've missed time. This is probably the only time I missed time. And after the fact, I was like, you know what? I actually didn't miss anything. So that was fine. Like I had COVID when Isaiah Stewart tried to fight LeBron and the Lakers. It was something else going on. Like I was not at the game for when Killian Hayes, I think Coach Mo Wagner on the bench. Like this is the first time I got sick and nothing happened at all. So at least in that case, I didn't miss anything. But yeah, usually whenever I miss something big. So this time I just got kind of lucky.
Do you get your writing done easier, faster, whatever, whenever you're at home? Like, is it just easier for you to do that? Because like, I know for me, whenever I watch a game in person, I get very distracted, right? Like, because you say you're always talking to
Mhm.
people. I always have to rewatch a game anytime I get to watch in attendance. And obviously, it's different for me and you. I don't get to do it nearly as much as you. But when you're at home, do you feel like it's easier to keep your notes because there's no distractions around? Is it easier to finish up your article because you're already sitting there and you're not having to walk back to the media room and stuff like that? Or is it harder to write your articles because you're not getting the quotes from Monty pre and post game and those type of things?
So that's the thing. I always do an instant gamer, and the instant gamer doesn't have quotes anyway because I'm fouling that within 10 minutes of the final buzzer. So that doesn't really change. Like I could do that from home, and that's fine. It's just the story I usually write after, which I mean, it could be anything. I say most of the time it's probably just off of that game, but sometimes it could be a feature I've been working on that I just got to save for after the game, or sometimes I may file something before the game if I think it's more worthwhile than waiting till after. So the main thing is any game that I'm usually producing two stories, and when I'm not at the arena, I can only produce one. So it probably hurts the desk more than it hurts me just because that's one less thing that they could put in the paper the next day or the day after. But at the same time, you have 82 of these games. Like, beat reporters get sick. Like, I was texting by her the other day, like, I could probably cover this game. And they were like, no, because then you end up prolonging things. And it's like, just stay home. So they only have 2 home games left. Like, that's the crazy part is that they have 10 games left. I think 8 of those 10 are on the road. They have one next Monday. And then, like, the week after that, they have one more. And that's it. So, like, I'm actually not going to be at the LCA too much more until next season, which is kind of funny to think about, but also just shows how late the season we are because we're going to talk basketball at some point. Like Jaden Ivey is the only guy that's like, well, Jaden Ivey is the only one who probably has any sort of off-season like stakes at this point in the year. So beyond that, like I don't even know who else we could really talk about. I mean, Metu's done some stuff. I don't even know beyond that, Bryce. I don't know what you got.
Yeah. So first off, real quick, back to LCA. I did see on Twitter the other day somebody talking about the LCA media room food, and I was like, "This is amazing," because you cued me in on this really early in my time, and you're like, "Yo, the food is really good here," like all of that,
Mhm.
and then I didn't realize that's not what it was like at every other arena around the NBA, and it's just not. So it was somebody that had come into town and they were a beat writer or media person or whatever, and they were talking about how good the food was there and how they're going to have to make it back there for halftime and all of that. So yeah, I mean, that is the one downside with you not getting to go back to LCA. But yeah, let's talk about Jaden Ivey. There are some other guys, if we have time, we can talk a little bit about, I know James Wiseman has gotten a little bit of love here and there. We've seen Buddy Boeheim get some minutes, Jared Rhoden, like there's names, but at the end of the day, I feel like Jaden Ivey is the one that people are talking the most about. And where I want to start, Omari, is, and we had Ku on last week. If anybody hasn't listened to that episode, go listen to it because we talked a lot about Jaden Ivey, and quite honestly, he brought some perspective that was good. It's interesting. It's a different perspective than definitely what I have, but I think what I've struggled with the last few days is I don't want Jaden Ivey to get a bad rap, or I don't want people to like quote unquote give up on Jaden Ivey based on these stretch of games. Like to me, that's a little bit crazy in terms of you're not putting him in a role to succeed over these games. We're seeing him play right now where he's starting with Sasser and he's starting with Tosan and Wiseman and those type of things. And I know people will say, well, we've seen Cade be successful. I also want to make this point. Cade and Jaden Ivey should not be held to the same standards. They were not drafted to be the same players. Cade Cunningham was drafted number 1 overall to be the face of the franchise, number 1 type option level of player. That's what Cade Cunningham was drafted to be. And we can have the debate if whether he's on the path to that or not. Jaden Ivey was not drafted to, in my opinion, was not drafted to be that. He was at most a second option playing off Cade, maybe a third option playing off Cade and somebody else. And so I don't think that Jaden Ivey would look good playing with all of these other guys that aren't really NBA level starters, maybe not even NBA level rotation players. I don't care who the opposition is. He's not going to thrive in that role and look good in that role, in my opinion. So I don't hold any of that against Jaden Ivey in terms of what we've seen recently. Now, there are bigger issues, and Kian brings it up here. The Ivy 3-point shooting decision making has been weird. At what point do you realize it's just not your night and change the game? So, Omari, I do want to continue to talk about that because I think whether it's Ivey's process or the coaching staff's process, the organization's process, whoever it is, I do not like how many threes he's been taking over the last maybe half of the season. I think I looked up today. If you go back 37 games, it's almost 6 a game. I'm not saying he should take 2. He should obviously knock down or shoot open ones, but I really would like to see him turn down some of the ones he's taking, about 2 a game right now, and attack the closeout. I think Ivey's mentality, Omari, should always first be attack the paint, get into the paint.
Yeah, he's got to get back to his bread and butter. And I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, but it hasn't gone down. I think I picked the over on him taking like 6.5 per game just off of vibes. Like I had no other analysis beyond it. I just got the vibe he's going to keep shooting them. But that's pretty much what it's been, right? Like he's sort of attacking the game inside out. And you look at his efficiency from before All-Star and after All-Star, and his numbers are pretty much going down across the board. His free throws have actually gone up, but his other numbers have gone down. A lot of that's just overall efficiency, yeah, but also I think shot distribution is part of that. And you look at that, the shooting he had earlier in the season, it seemed like he had actually turned a corner there in some in some capacity. Like he was hovering around 36%. And it's just been, he's been like in the low 30s, upper 20s for a couple months now. And I don't like a lot of the threes that he's taking. They're not really like in like feet set in motion. Those type of threes, they're, you know, he's like having some pull-ups he's not hitting, or, you know, some movement step back threes. And just for a player like him, he probably doesn't need to be taking 7 anyway, because that's never really been his game. But the issue now is that the only other player on the roster who's really setting the table, well, the only other 2 are Sasser and Flynn. And you have these 2 6'1" guards. You know, Flynn's not really much of a shooter, and Sasser's more of an off guard than a point guard at this stage.
He's at least more of a scorer than he is of a distributor creator for others.
Exactly. So, you know, I just don't know if Ivey's even in the environment now with 10 games left where they could really do anything to help him get better looks, unless we bring a couple guys back. Like at the very least, maybe Cade or Fontecchio or somebody. I know you're not going to get a Sar and Stu and some of the other guys back who are out, but there just needs to be some structure in place. And the 3-point shooting's just been part of what's felt like almost an aimless month or so for Ivey, almost, where it just seems like he's kind of regressed in some ways compared to the growth he has shown earlier in the season. And he's also sort of the default go-to guy now with everybody else out, and the efficiency just hasn't been there at all, along with the playmaking. So it's just been a pretty tough month of basketball to watch, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think he's completely like, you can't just give it all. Like, he's got to be more efficient at the rim. I think we gave him a lot of love at the beginning of the year for how well that had improved from his rookie season. And I think in some ways it has regressed. There's still defensive things. Some of the Dante DiVincenzo stuff that happened on Monday was directly Jaden Ivey not staying locked in off the ball. So I do not want to completely let him off the hook. I'm just saying that I don't think these games are like, should be the nail in the coffin of we should trade Jaden Ivey or something like that. If people want to think that it's not going to work, it's okay. There's absolutely an argument there. I think the bigger argument is like, I still am of the belief that I don't think Monty Williams values what he does for what Monty wants out of that position. And I'm starting to want, like, does even Cade want that as much as Cade wants the ball in his hands? The other thing, like, I got to call it out, guys. Like, peek behind the curtain. I'm sure everybody is going, why is Bryce rambling for 3 minutes here? Omari was working with his mic and trying to get the right one connected. So do not blame me. I was trying to actually take one for the team. And I'm glad you fixed it, because I was running out of what to say. It's been, Wes, how long has it been since I've done one solo? I used to do solo.
That's insane. I can't imagine talking for an hour solo.
So it wasn't an hour.
Okay.
We used to do post-game recaps. We would record right after the game. Wes would come on. He would take notes, stuff like that. But it would just be me. I've never done an hour one. Whenever it was Motor City Hoops, we would always bring on a guest. But, man, it's been a while since I've done that, Omari. I was starting to struggle there after a couple minutes. I needed you to get the mic fixed so I could go back to you.
Yeah, I just started, like, I got a MacBook recently. I just started using this to, you know, record, and it was just set to like my headphone mic and not the mic I'm using here. So I don't know if the listeners could notice live. They'll probably notice on the recording later when my audio goes from like 720 to 4K quality all of a sudden 10 minutes in. But yeah, with all that said, like Bryce, like what would you like to see? I guess with 10 games though, we still have a couple minutes. Like, is it just getting Cade back and just seeing that evaluation a little bit more while there's time left? Like, what realistically can we look at with 10 games left, assuming that the injury report can improve in some capacity?
So like I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or whatever. Like I think like some rest was needed for some of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wonder if after the Timberwolves game, whenever the schedule gets a little bit lighter, if we see these guys come back. Now, there is a 3-game stretch right at the end where they play some tough opponents, but I just wonder if the organization is going to go, okay, let's rest Cade here for a few games, Fontecchio, I don't know what, Duran, whatever, but then we'll bring him back after the Wolves game and we'll try to make a late season push to an extent, right? I understand that's a very nuanced phrase right there, but let's get some momentum going into the offseason. So I expect or would like to see Cade back, Fontecchio back, Duran back, see these guys play some games together down the stretch, 8 or 9 games. YouTube user brings up full-blown tank mode. Listen, that may be what the organization is thinking. I think that's a flawed opinion. I put it in my notes today on the Substack from the game on Monday night. There is no way I would be tanking in this draft. Essentially, right now, the Pistons are locked in with the worst or second worst record. 1 through 4 is locked in, Omari. It's the same percentage, whether you're the worst or second worst. The only thing that changes is you take 20% chance of beginning 5th and you move it to 6th. So you could fall. I don't care in this draft. This isn't a 5-player draft or something like that. So if it is like quote unquote tank mode, I completely disagree with that philosophy from the organization. I think there is much more value getting these guys on the floor, Omari, and seeing if you can build some sort of momentum moving forward.
No doubt. This is like the 3rd or 4th straight year where we've seen some of the guys shut down at the end of the season. Last year, I remember it was like they lost 23 of their last 25 or something like that. And probably except 2 or 3 of those games were with them putting a skeleton of a roster out. And obviously, I mean, this season has been lost long before we got to this stage. But to see it end similarly, especially when you still need data on some of these guys, right? Like we barely got to see Quentin Grimes. I know he's had these tournaments since before the draft. We saw Fontecchio. Maybe he's already proven going into the summer, but again, you probably watched him for 15 games, maybe. Like it was not like an amazing sample size. Cade, he had hit his groove after a somewhat rough first 18 games. Could he finish the year on an even stronger note? And it's just been a lot of losing too. Like I understand from a fan standpoint, just wanting to see the team close out with some energy. They talked a lot about closing the year strong, running through the tape, I think is the phrase that they have been using. And they're not running through the tape right now. Like this is just like last night's game was hard to watch. The one before that was really hard to watch. Like that's just not what's happening right now. So it would be nice to be able to take something away and not just write off the last 2 games. But at the same time, it does look like they're trending towards shutting some guys down, which for this draft, I mean, I agree. There's nobody really you want to tank for. And with the new odds, it doesn't matter anyway. They did all that last year and started up with the 5th pick. So, it's not like. Plus, the Wizards have a 2-game lead over them at this point too. So
yeah, especially now.
Yeah, so I don't really know what else there is to decide at this point.
I mean, they go after the Timberwolves game, they go Wizards for their last 9, Wizards, Grizzlies, Hawks, Grizzlies, Nets. Then they get the 3-game stretch of the Sixers, Bulls, and Mavericks. And then they finish with the Spurs. I'm not saying all of those are winnable, anything like that. I'm just saying, like, if you went 4 and 5 down the stretch, I think there would be a little bit of, especially if it was with Cade, Ivey, Fontecchio, all of that. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Let's finish with this. I'll kind of leave this more to you, and then we'll go to the break and get to some March Madness. So Derek Brooks over on Twitter, appreciate your support. Has this Detroit basketball season spun off the rails far enough that some type of organizational change? And then his follow-up, he makes it a little bit easier, Omari. Do you think an organizational change of some sort, and I assume, I don't mean to put words in his mouth, that means either coach or front office, something like that? I assume he's not necessarily talking about just players. Do you think it's more possible or probable at this point? My answer is I don't think it's probable. I think we see the same head coach next year. I think they give Troy Weaver the offseason to make the decisions. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it. That's what I think will happen. What do you think, Omari?
I think the odds have been pretty much the same since the 28 game losing streak. It's like, if you can withstand that and not lose your job, then at that point, I think it's pretty much, it's
That's a
pretty
fair
much
point.
set. So I would say compared to like maybe, I guess I don't know, like compared to what point is it more probable? Like to me, that's like the event horizon, right? And it didn't happen then. I think like the probability to me has always been there. Like it's for me, it's just a matter of like the timing of it. And I still think the main question now is, do you just wait till after the season ends to do some of the cleanup you didn't do in the middle of the season? And I do think that there's still a chance of that, but I also think there's going to be a lot of extensive conversations about the direction of the franchise that I mean I'm sure are happening now, and of course will pick up steam once the season ends. So we'll see. But I mean, I've seen the possibility of a shakeup, being there since that 28 game streak. So I don't think anything's happened since then to change the calculus, if that makes sense. I mean, they're going to finish the season with somewhere between, at the current pace. I mean, they may not crack the 17 wins they had last year. Like they would have to win, basically half of their games remaining. So, yeah, again, I think 28 straight was probably the worst they can get. So if you get past that, at that point, I think it's just, it's up to Tom Gores and ownership. We'll see when the season ends what they want to do.
All right, let's go to break. When we come back, we're going to get away from the Pistons a little bit. I mean, I'm sure this will always drift back because we're talking about March Madness and draft and that type of stuff. We're going to go to that, and then we will play Sheet or Sham at the end. It's been way too long since we brought on Wes to do that, but we'll start all of that with March Madness after this short break.
All right, we are back with segment 2, and we're going to get into March Madness. We're going to get into a handful of draft prospects here. That sound was Bryce cracking his knuckles because he's about to put on his draft.
No. I'm going to you. I'm going to cut you off here. Listen, I talked NBA draft for an hour and a half last night with Sam Vecini, Game Theory Pod. If you guys want to go, we did a full first round mock. You can go check it out. Here's what I want to ask you, Omari. I'm going to play host here for a little while because I know you've done some work here. Pistons irrelevant. Who is the player that has impressed you the most through March Madness in terms of games you've got to watch, just things you've seen? What, like, not necessarily like the best player, not who you'd have number one. Is there a player through the tournament that you're like, oh, like I didn't realize this guy was maybe as good as what I thought he, as what people were saying, or I thought he was?
Yeah, I mean, it's a guy that's not. I don't think he has an NBA career, but Jack Goki, just Oakland. Like shout out to Oakland. I mean, just being a local school here, so many people that go there. My dad actually got his master's degree at Oakland. And
shout out Omari.
And Goki was obviously a sharpshooter coming into the tournament, but to see him, I think he knocked down 13 in that first round upset, and just to see him go off like that, like to me, that's just the epitome of a March Madness performance. And he also he just. Like you look at the hairline and everything, he kind of has like a Sid from like Toy Story thing going a little bit, like where it's like he just has this like energy, and it's just like perfect March Madness. Like I'm a big fan of that. You were confused by the Toy Story reference, so like you did not pick up on that at all. I could see, or did you?
No, I know who you're talking about.
Okay.
I did. Here's the stat, Omari.
Okay.
Here is the stat of this guy. Man, he is a little bit older. He has taken 372 field goal attempts this year, Omari. Do you know how many of those are 2-point field goal attempts of 372?
It was like 3, right? 3 or 4?
It's 8, but
okay,
yes, something that is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people text me, commented to me on Twitter or whatever, like, this is your person. Like, this is exactly who you wanted to be. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are right. This is exactly who I wanted to be. It truly was an amazing performance. I don't think people realize, and I don't mean to like insult anybody's intelligence or level of play. I don't think people realize the energy and effort it takes and that you have to expend to do what he did. I think he took 20 in one of those games, and the level of difficulty of the attempts, how he was running, like that wears you down. And see him do it in a big moment on a big stage against Kentucky, who I had in the Final Four, like already one Final Four team out. It was really impressive. So, okay, we gave him his love. and his due attention. Give me a draft prospect. So Blake Silverman, shout out Blake, who is on the DBB podcast, The Pin Down with Wes Davenport over on YouTube. If you guys aren't watching, you should be, or listening on podcast platforms or whatever you do. Wes and Blake do a great job. He says Tristan Da Silva, who is a wingy forward out of Colorado, who has truly had a really good NCAA tournament and I think has really done well for himself in terms of NBA draft stuff. He was like a borderline first round pick that's now, I think, solidly in the first round. So give me a name, Omari. Is there somebody NBA draft wise that maybe has stood out to you? Maybe it's negative. Maybe there's a guy that you thought was good and then you watch and you're like, what's all the hype about?
Yeah, well, both of the Kentucky guys kind of flamed out, which was, not great for their draft stock, obviously. Although I still like Reed Shepherd a lot. Like he's probably my favorite guy in this draft, just because he's the one guy where it's like I feel like he's an above average NBA player for 10 years. Like I don't know if anybody else really crosses that threshold in this draft where I could just watch a guy play and I'm like, yeah, he's a starter for an NBA team for a long time. Reed Shepherd still has that, even though I think he only scored 3 points.
He had a rough game, but anybody who wants to go through that, go look up Brandon Miller's stats. And then people will say, oh, well, he did have off the court stuff going on, but just go look up his 3 games in the NCAA tournament. And I think it carries even beyond that, but that 3-game stretch was rough and he overcame it. And not only did he overcome it, he passed Scoot as the number 2 pick, and then he's had a pretty good rookie season. So, I mean, 1 game of Reed Shepherd, the dude still shoots over 50% from 3 on the season.
Yeah. So of course he's still probably a top 5 pick in this draft. I don't think one bad performance does anything to undo that. I mean, Kevin Durant had a bad game in the tournament. I feel like the tournament's the type of deal where a good performance could help you, but a bad performance, if you were already in good standings, is not going to hurt you, which is probably how it should be. Honestly, like the guys I played the most attention to are just the guys who are in the Pistons draft range. Like that's usually how I approach it. And none of those guys have really stood out to me that much. Like I've still been waiting to see that breakout performance for Jacoby Waters, since he's a guy that seems to have some Pistons skills as an outside shooter and a guy who can get a bucket. And he got to the line a lot, but beyond that, he still struggled to hit shots in the tournament. You have a guy like Stephon Castle. I like his game a lot. I think he could be a really solid rotation guard for a long time. He's only taken, I think, 4 3-pointers in 2 games, and he only hit 1. So that's like his big knock. And I don't think the Pistons need a guard really to begin with, especially not a guard who can't shoot. Cody Williams, like I think statistically he's probably been on the quieter side all year anyway, but he didn't necessarily have a big game. I know he scored a few more in the last game against Marquette, 12 points, a couple blocks. But again, none of these guys have really had standout games. And if I'm looking at guys in the Pistons range, that makes sense for the team. I think Donovan Klingen's been good. I mean, I'll give him a shout out. He's been solid. And as a defensive big, I think he does make sense for Detroit. But beyond that, there hasn't really been, to me, that standout performance that's had any impact from a Pistons standpoint.
Well, what's tough is, so the first 5 players on my board aren't playing in college basketball. So like that's a part of it as well in terms of that, Castles that like Shepherd, those guys, Dalton Connect is a really interesting player from Tennessee. You brought up Jacoby Walter. That's an interesting, like, I think Jacoby went like 14th in the mock that Sam and I did yesterday. He's actually a guy who I think is trending the other way, to be honest with you, just because people are trying to figure some things out with him. And how good is the defense? Is it that high level? Is it not? How much do you buy the shooting? The 3-point percentage isn't great. I think he's under 40% from the field overall, but the free throw percentage is really good. And again, we've talked about this, I think, on this pod. Some people just actually use the free throw percentage and 3-point volume as the best indicators for a floor spacer at the NBA level. So he's going to be an interesting one. I don't think he ends up getting as part of the equation for the Pistons unless they just do really, really drop. Let's talk about the big. So you brought up Klingen. Wes brought up Zach Edey, who has been awesome. And I'm going to tell you, like, Zach Edey, I feel like this is a name that people are going to have opinions about because it's a Big Ten guy. More and more, it sounds like Zach Edey might be a first-round pick. Like, again, I didn't take him, but Sam took him in the first round last night. Go with Klingen or Edey, either one, Omari. But what are your thoughts on kind of that archetype of just this massive, big who doesn't space the floor. I think Klingen's a good passer. I don't know about Edey. They're probably not just going to post up on the block and do those type of things like we see Edey do all the time. What do you see as the value for that archetype? Like, how do you see those guys playing out in the NBA?
Yeah, I think Klingen is an easier player to translate. I think just because he probably is the best defensive big man in college basketball, so you could just look at guys like Walker Kessler or
Sure.
Mark Williams who have come in and essentially been plus rim protectors from day one. And you look at Klingon, he's 7'2", 7'7" wingspan. Like there's nothing about his size or his defensive instincts that's not going to translate. So just getting a guy like that who could come in and you're like 95% sure that they're going to be a plus rim protector at least by year 2. I think that's extremely valuable. I know there's been some talk about his touch and shooting. Like, I don't know if you draft him really for any of that. Like, for him, it's just more so the fact that he can be at least a backup big, who can really defend. But even with that, like, his footwork's pretty good. He's a really good screener. He could do some stuff, playmaking with the ball. They do some dribble handoff stuff. Like, there's some stuff with him that I think is pretty intriguing where it's like he's a rotation big, but those are all skills you need in starting bigs too.
So I took him for the Grizzlies as a replacement for Steven Adams. Like, go pair him with Jaren Jackson Jr. And like,
what was that, like the 4th pick?
Ended up the 8th. Like we did the tankathon spin, so it ended up a little funny. The Pistons ended up at 1, but then like the Rockets ended up at 2, and all of that. But I was like, okay, yeah, this that's a little bit higher than what I have him on my board, but I'm just like, this makes sense. Like I think truly this draft is going to be crazy, Omari, because the tiers just aren't there. At the end of the day, 1 through 3 was pretty well locked in last year, 1 especially, and then you knew like that's not it this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like Alex Sarr, you could have made an argument with how things landed. Alex Sarr could have fell to 3 with what we did last night because he took Ricochet 1 for the Pistons, and then I debated whether the Rockets would take Alex Sarr because they have Şengün, and so it's like, okay, do they pass and just take, a Reed Shepherd or Matas Buzelis or something like that? So I think a lot of the top 7 or 8 is going to be the same names for people, but I think
different orders,
crazy different orders. And it's going to be really dependent on who lands those picks. I think we'll see fit be the determining factor a lot more than we normally would at the draft.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's just, I think the lottery is pretty much going to dictate the order. If it's a team that's guard needy at the top, you're going to see guys, who are guards like Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, Nikola Topic, like those types of guys go in the top 5. If it's a team that needs a big, it'll be Star. If you need a wing, it'll be Ricochet. So we'll just see. I think, Pistons wise, that'll be interesting as well too, given that they really only have a strong need for a wing if you just break it down positionally. Yet after Ricochet, this is not like an amazing wing draft in the top 5 or 6. So, where do you go in that? Like, do you just trade the pick at that point, or just see if you can move down if there's a guy you like? I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. You did ask about Edey. Only thing I'll say about Edey is that the dude's just a monster. I just wonder if, I think he can probably have a higher outcome than a guy like a Luka Garza, only because I think he's just a lot more physically dominant.
He's way bigger, right?
Like he's way bigger.
Way more physical.
Yeah, like just way bigger and way more physical. And I think that's the main issue with Luka Garza is just that he just is not built like an NBA big man. And if you're not, then you've got to have playmaking and ball handling and some other stuff to make up for it, which he just didn't really have. But Edey, I mean, the dude could pass, like the dude can defend. He's probably had 2 or 3 blocks in every game of the tournament so far. Obviously, his footwork in the paint's pretty amazing. 7'4". To me, he's a first-round pick just in the sense that you could see him being a rotation big for a long time just because a guy 7'4" who moves that well and has that type of skill set is probably going to be able to do something at the NBA level. Like, I feel pretty good about him at least being a rotation type big. I don't know if he has a ceiling beyond that, but I can see that.
So I think that's the difference between Klingon and Edey for me. One, Klingon is younger, and I think he moves a little bit better. And just like, I think in general, there's a little more upside in terms of being an actual starter. I think Edey is more of like, hey, he's just your second unit big who's going to come in. He can only play drop, but that's okay. And here's the thing. Zach Edey, like, so in my scouts, I put like things that these guys do in college that I don't think translate. For Edey, I don't think a team just going to set him on the left block, throw it to him, let him turn over his left shoulder to the middle and score.
No.
Not in a first unit, Omari,
Yeah.
but in a second unit against second unit players, he runs a screen and roll and somehow it ends up a switch. If it's just that massive where he can just catch, turn, and score, like that may all of a sudden be something that's valuable. So I could see where that ends up being something positive for him, where a team sees, into the first round, older player that's ready to come in right away. Maybe one of these contenders who has no money to spend in free agency or any other way to acquire a second unit big, they just say, hey, we'll take Zach Edey. We want to play drop coverage. We need somebody that sets crazy screens. He can play 10 or 12 minutes during the regular season, and then we're going to phase him out in the playoffs anyway. So it doesn't matter because we're going to short our rotation to 8. To me, that makes sense. It really comes out. Wes and I have talked about this, Omari. What it comes down to is value. That's what the NBA draft is about. What do you value? How, at pick 15, what are you looking for? What are you trying to get? At pick 25 for this team, for that team. That's why I think Sham makes sense for the Pistons. He's not going to look like a number one pick, Omari. Nobody's going to look at Zachary Sham and say number one pick. But I think he comes in and he does the things this specific team and organization needs right now.
No doubt. And you probably feel a bit better about it just because he's so young. So you could at least talk yourself into maybe he has this to his game, or maybe he has that to his game. You do see guys that young make pretty significant improvements from year 1 to year 2. Bryce, I'll just leave you with this. Beyond Sham, is there another player conceivably in Detroit's range, let's just say 1 through 8, who has, just from like a talent standpoint, just makes sense from like a fit standpoint, right? Like you look at their skills and they address some of what Detroit's need, whether it's size of the perimeter or shooting. Who's that guy outside of Sham that you think makes a lot of sense?
Well, if they drop like Dalton Connect, Wes has been pushing this one to me. Dalton Connect scores the basketball. Like, and here's my pitch for Dalton Connect. People are going to look at the age and the years in college. Here's what I'll say. He was short in high school that had a late growth spurt. He played zone in high school. Then he went JUCO. I have nothing against JUCO. I'm a JUCO product. But you're not always learning the best fundamentals, especially defensively at junior college. Then you go to Northern Colorado. Again, I know the staff there. I love those guys, but it's not Tennessee. You're not getting the same level of development and care on your, like all of these things. He's had 1 year, not even a full 12 months at Tennessee. Point being, I think that Dalton Connect has more room to grow than your normal 22-year-old, fifth year, college basketball player. And he averaged like 30 points a game in the SEC for however many games. Like this dude can really come in and score if you can figure out the defense. I will say Team Savant brings up Matas Buzelis. I don't know what went on with Matas Buzelis' shot in the G League Ignite. But if you tell me he's going to get back to what he was in high school, I'm in, because there's a lot of other really nice things about Matas Buzelis that I like, with his size, his off-ball defense, some defensive playmaking, block shots, those type of things. But I really, really would like to just believe in the jumper. The form looks good. The numbers weren't great. Here's one last thing, and then I'll let you finish up, Omari, before we go to break. The Ignite guys are going to get a bump. Like the NBA just canceled the Ignite because it was so bad. I think all of those guys get a bump and a little bit of a pass. Him, Ron Holland, Tyler Smith, etc. because of that.
Yeah, what's nice about Dalton Connect is that that he's going to come in and give you great shooting at the very least. But with that, I mean, he's 6'6". He's not like an undersized guy. Like he does have pretty solid size for the wing. I just wondered, I mean, the defensive aspect for him is really going to be key. I think that's the one thing I'm curious about. But at worst, if you just have a pretty solid shooter, I mean, that's still a pretty big plus for a lot of teams, right? And he's a good athlete too.
He's a good athlete. And Blake says it. This is like, I actually know this to be true. Connect went to Tennessee specifically to improve as a defender. Like that is true. Like I know that to be true, that he specifically chose Tennessee because he recognized a weakness and he wanted to go get better at it. Did it all click? Not necessarily. Here's the other thing though, Omari. It hasn't clicked as much, maybe because of the insane amount of usage he has to take at Tennessee offensively that I don't know that he or they anticipated whenever he got there. So I think there's potential for some more growth there defensively. And just in terms of a fit that you asked me about, he would make a lot of sense to come in and just space the floor, knock down shots. And he's more than just a shooter. Like that might be the floor offensively. Like he can I've had someone tell me that he's a 3-level bucket getter at any level. Like this dude can score the basketball.
How high would you take him?
So he is in my tier of 8 guys that is 1 through 8. Now there's a little bit of fluidity to that. Like I'm not saying I would take Dalton Connect at 1. That's not what I'm saying. There's some overlap in all of that. I considered him at 6 last night for the Blazers. I ended up not taking him because I wanted to change it up, and I had taken him at 6 at like 7 the previous time. But if they fall out of, like, I still think it's Ricochet. I think at a certain point you have to take Alex Sarr and like just figure out what you're gonna do there. Like Reed Shepherd is a possibility. Like, but if you take Reed, then you're probably gonna have to move. Like Connect is the guy you draft, and you don't even have to move anybody else. Like he just falls right in there. I would not take him over Matas Buzelis, I don't think. But I mean, what they get, if all 3 of those guys are off the board and you're at 4, like I guess, like I think that's a little bit crazy for Connect, but they fall 5, 6, something like that. Like I think it's a conversation.
He's one of those guys where you don't overthink it, right? Like you look back in a lot of drafts, and it's the players like him who end up carving out 10-year careers just because they come in essentially ready bait. And I think especially at this stage in the rebuild for the Pistons, you probably just need more guys who are ready, right? In a draft like this, do you want to wait around until 2028 to see if you've got a guy? Like, I don't know if you've got that type of time. So
that's fair with Ricochet too. Ricochet is 18 years old. This is why I have him as high on my board as I do, just in general, is because he's an 18-year-old playing in a professional league. And it's like, can we give some credence to that? Like, yeah, he's had a bad few games. He's 18 years old. He doesn't turn 19 till after summer league or something like that. But for the Pistons, if you want to kind of go win games next year, is that the right pick? Maybe it's not. So
maybe not. All right. We're a little bit past time. We are going to we're going to wrap up segment 2 and get into segment 3, where we're going to bring back a game we haven't played in a while. All right, we are back with segment 3, and we're going to bring in the man, the myth, the legend, Wes Davenport. I might have caught you a little bit there, Wes. What's up?
Oh, I've been good. I'm excited to get this Shooter Sham game going. It has been a while. I didn't realize it till you guys suggested it this past week, how long it had been.
Yeah. How long had you looked it up? I mean, it's got to be a few months. Probably since.
It's got to be.
I mean, here's the thing. When the season starts, we always talk about this. The content kind of writes itself until the season goes the way this season went, and then the content no longer writes itself. So Shooter Sham is our favorite game, and plus it gets you on here and people to hear your voice, but it does kind of tend to lend itself a little bit more to the off season and stuff like that because we don't have the games to talk about or a crazy trade deadline or something like that.
Yeah. Well, since it had been so long, I figured I'd give everyone listening kind of the rundown again. So obviously this is a true or false game, right? I'm going to say a fact, or at least I'm going to present it as a fact. And Bryce and Omari, they're going to have to tell me if it's Sheed, which would be true, or Sham, which is false. We added the last time we played this, the phone the chat question. Okay, so if you guys are watching live with us on Twitter or on YouTube, Bryce and Omari, one time you could ask the chat for an answer and then decide whether or not to go with it. And our standings right now. Bryce, you've won 4 games. Omari 6. So that's close.
That's way closer than I thought it was going to be. So, okay, nice. Yeah. Plus, I'll add 2 to mine because I know Omari cheats because I can't ever see his hands while we're playing the game.
So. Like, I've had my hands up for like the last 5.
Or you and Wes talk about the questions, the statements beforehand. So
Never. Me and Wes are not in cahoots.
Okay, let's go.
All right, Omari, I'll ask you this one first. Okay, so just kind of a fun March Madness one. Of current Detroit Pistons players, Jaden Ivey has gotten the furthest in March Madness. Sheed or Sham?
Yeah, well, now the roster's changed so much, I have to sort through my head who is no longer part of this team and who. Okay, so Marvin Bagley's no longer here because I was like, he probably would have been the longest previously. Well, he for sure would have been the longest previously because he was on that undefeated Kentucky team. Duke team, I mean. Wait, no, he wasn't. Wait, which year did Bagley play for Duke? That was 15, right?
I'll look. You decide on your answer.
Anyway, okay, yeah. Kentucky went undefeated, not Duke.
Yeah.
But he was in that tournament, though, I think.
17-18.
Yeah, okay. Came a little bit like, who am I thinking of? Anyway, okay.
He went to the Elite Eight, just for the record.
Yeah. Okay. I knew he went past the Sweet 16. Man, Shooter Sham. It's probably somebody random I'm not thinking of who made like a really, really deep run. I'm actually gonna go Sham.
All right, I was gonna go Sham as well.
Yeah.
It is Sham. All right, so Jaden Ivey, he made it to the Sweet 16.
The Houston guys, right? The Houston guys.
Yeah, it is, because Sasser and Grimes, they both made it to the Final Four in 2020.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Yeah, so those were if they didn't, like I couldn't have told you specifically how far they made it, Ivy or them. I just assumed that those Houston guys had made it further.
Yeah, I was thinking about Trey Lyles. He was the one who was on the undefeated Kentucky team.
Oh, Tosan with Princeton. Good call here by Blake Silverman.
Yeah.
I did check it. It was thankfully not important because it matched Jaden Ivey. But yeah, and hopefully I was right. I did try to go through everyone, but it's kind of tough to sort through those. So
yeah,
fingers crossed that I was right.
Well,
Bryce,
there's a few, if you go through, it's like, that you knew they didn't make it too far, but no, Houston, Sasser and Grimes. Okay, next one. So we're tied. Good start.
We're tied. Bryce, this was going to you first. Sheed or Sham, since the All-Star break, the Detroit Pistons are shooting a worse percentage from the field, a worse percentage from three, and are averaging 7 fewer points per game.
Sheed.
Very specific one.
Sheed.
Since the All-Star break.
Yep.
Hold up. So if they're shooting worse from the field, worse from three, but only scoring 6.6 less points per game, then it's Sham?
It's up for interpretation. I'm not going to say the rules.
This is how you guys screw me over on this game. I will stay with Sheed.
I'm going to go Sham then, just to go opposite of Bryce.
It was Sheed. Before the All-Star break, 47% from the floor, 36% from three, 113 points per game. After 45% from the floor, 33% from three, and then only 106 points per game. So not good.
I wonder, you're the stats guy, and I'm not going to ask you to do this. Like, I wonder what that drop is compared to league average. Because obviously there's been all this conversation about how scoring is down around the league and the officiating and all of those things. I just wonder, like, that drop seems probably substantial compared even to other teams, but I wonder if it's as crazy as what it sounds, just in terms of the points per game. Obviously, especially the 3-point percentage doesn't have a whole lot to do with that. That's kind of crazy how much it's dropped, but it would be interesting just to know how much on par that is with what the league has done as a whole.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I feel like it'd probably be more, only because not only was this a free throw attempts thing, but it looks like, it's just shooting in general that's kind of driving it.
Wait, so free throw attempts have gone down also for the Pistons?
I don't know. I didn't have that one.
Okay. All right. Omari, I got an early lead, but I feel like we've been down this path before. And
to the free throw question is actually somewhat interesting. I've been checking the last couple of days, but I think the Pistons free throws have gone down slightly, but their standing in the NBA has gone way up because the NBA's cut down on calling free throws for a lot of the stars. So I know like a week ago, they were like 16th in free throws per game previous to the All-Star. And then since then, they're 7th, but they're actually taking fewer free throws than they were before. And that's just how much free throws have fallen in the league. Anyway, that actually would have been a good sheet or Sham, because I would have do that one, but it's okay.
See, we're not in cahoots.
Yeah.
But speaking of free throws, that's actually the topic of the next question.
Here we
go.
Here you go. Yeah.
Sheet or Sham, Cade Cunningham leads the Pistons in free throw attempts per game.
Sham.
I feel like I actually looked this up the other day. I'm going to say Sheed because I was thinking he didn't, and then he was. And now I can't remember if it was actually the other way around.
It's Sheed. He is 4.3 attempts per game. Jaden Ivey second at 4.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I
was close. Yeah.
I think I went into it assuming doesn't it seem like Jaden Ivey draws more fouls? Am I crazy feeling that way that he gets to the free throw line more?
He does. I think it's just like a minute disparity. Like that's part of it. Like per 100, like I'm sure Ivy probably draws more.
I will actually player stats. It would be, I can look that up per 100. But yeah, that was because I remember I did this the other day. I went into it looking or expecting to like be able to type out, hey, you know, like Jaden Ivey actually averages more free throw attempts than Cade Cunningham. And I came out of it and was not able to do so. So per 100 possessions, yeah, Jaden is at 6.7. Cade is at 6.1. Buddy Boeheim is at 5. Holy cow. Here are the names around. This is what's crazy about this season. So guess the names. I'm sorry, Wes. I'm hijacking this. Guess the names around. So Jaden is 3rd. If you just take everybody that's played for the team this season, and then Cade is 4th. Guess just the names around those two in terms of free throw attempts per 100 possessions.
Bojan.
Yeah, I was going to say Bogey and Burks are probably up there.
Bogey's 6. Burke is actually 2nd. So actually above both of them.
And but somebody else is number 1.
Yeah. So you have a number 1, and then you have 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. Some are still on the team, some are not. But obviously I'm asking because it's not the people you would think.
Is Monte Morris up here?
Monty is not.
Yeah. Like number 1, I feel like it would be somebody who played only little minutes, but it just got blown up. So I would guess it's somebody like something you would not even think of. Like
it's Gallo.
Yeah. Like I was like it's somebody who probably
here's what it is for 100. 1 is Gallo, 6 games played. Then Burks, then Ivy and Cade. Marvin Bagley's 5th. Boyan 6th. Buddy's 7th, 4 games played. Umude is 8th. I mean, he did play 24 games. And then Metu 4 games. Tosan 10 is next. Then Grimes. And then you have to get to 12th before you get to Jalen Duren. I mean, it just
wow.
It's interesting. And I realize like per 100 possessions and per 36, even as YouTube user asks, I'll look that up real quick as you guys talk about that. But I mean, that just, it's interesting. Definitely interesting.
You know, Duren probably doesn't get to the line as much as most centers because, well, one, you know, his play style is not like a drawing fouls play style for the most part. Like he's catching a lot of lobs and whatnot. But 2, he's also a good free throw shooter, so he's not being put on the line intentionally at all. And I actually don't know how common hack and shack's been this season. Like I haven't really seen much discussion about it, but I would assume that's probably something to do with it.
Obviously, all the per 36 minutes are the same because you're comparing teammates to each other. So their possessions per minute and all that stuff is going to be the same. So anyway, all right. Sorry, Wes, I kind of hijacked that, but that's the point of this is go down different paths.
Yeah, that was fun. All right. And I think this one's the next one's going to go to you, right, Bryce? I think I asked Omari first.
And I'm up 3-1, I think is correct.
Yes. Yes, you are. So Sheet or Sham. On this podcast, we have obviously said that we would like to see Isaiah Stewart play 75% of his minutes at the 5, 25% at the 4. This is going back into last offseason. So Sheet or Sham, Isaiah Stewart's minute distribution is the exact inverse of that. So 75% at the 4 and 25% at the 5.
Sheet.
Yeah, I was going to say Sheet.
We were too quick on that one. Were we both right?
You're both right. Yeah, I just thought it was pretty funny. To be fair, it's 76 and 24, but that's close enough where it's pretty funny that is the exact opposite of what you guys said you wanted to see before the season started.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I've actually seen that one recently. I don't know why I looked it up, but
it'll be interesting to revisit some of our preseason expectations and all of that whenever we get to it.
Yeah.
So I just
probably all wrong.
Oh, they're always wrong. I tweeted this out the other day. Like I always try to predict who the player is going to be that falls out of favor with the fan base. I did not have Jaden Ivey as one of my top names on the bingo card. So Stu went from, this is just his center minutes at center. This is B-ball reference, which isn't always perfect. Obviously you can figure out how many minutes at power forward based off what centers 100%, 98, 55, 24. So his career arc has done my hope is, I don't know what this is, but then it just starts to trend right back the other way, right? Like maybe next year we can get 50-50-ish and then we can get to that 75 and we just start trending back the other direction. But Right now, it's definitely, we've talked about it. Omari, they tried him out at the 4. They've done some, the thing is, to Stu's credit, he actually has shot the 3 ball better this year.
Yes.
Like that did come around in terms of 38% on almost 4 attempts a game. That's right there around where we talked about him needing to be.
Yeah, that's one of the few, I think, pure bright spots of the season is that he did figure out the shooting aspect. I know a lot of people debated, the actual spacing being produced because teams weren't committing and this and that, but that's the first step, is just getting the percentage up, and he did it. So now it's just, how could he continue to grow from here? Which to me, I think his handle is probably the next thing he needs to really sort of dial down. And if he gets that, I think his minutes at the 4 probably go a lot smoother.
All right. I think we have 2 more questions, Wes. So I think if we just go ahead and get into them, and then we can finish them off.
All right, let's dive in. Mari, this one's going to you. So of the players who have played significant minutes for the Pistons, so this is excluding like the Buddy Boeheims, right? Jalen Duren leads the team in true shooting percentage. Sheet or Sham?
This is players currently on the roster?
Yes.
True shooting percentage from players currently on the roster. I'm just going to dot my I's real quick, make sure I'm not missing anybody. Yeah, I'm gonna go sheet.
Okay, so I wanted to go sheet, but for the sake of the game and to continue to give Omari a chance, I will say Sham.
It is Sham. It was James Wiseman, 66%. Duren second at 65.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I think that locks in the dub.
It does.
It does. Yeah, you're blowing them out.
I like it.
5-2.
And that means I'm close, within 1 game of getting to 500. I like it.
Yep.
All right, let's go ahead and do the last one, and then we'll close things out here.
Well, there's actually 2 more, but we can get to the very last one if we have time, if we want. So these next 2 could just be for fun if we do them both. Of the total number of 3-pointers attempted, Bryce, this one's going to you. Marcus Sasser takes the highest percentage of unassisted threes. So to be clear, I'm not saying shoots the highest percent.
Sheed.
Sheed. He picked Sheed. Omari, what do you say?
So I need to hear the rest of the question.
He's saying that Marcus Sasser makes more shots off the bounce from
takes.
3 than. Oh, this was takes, not makes. I still Sheed.
Then who?
Everybody else on the roster.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm going sheet.
Yes, it is sheet. So 35% of his 3-point attempts are actually unassisted. Cade is the next closest at 30. And to be fair, Malachi Flynn is technically leading the way, but he's played so little. But he's all the way up at 44%, which is pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I write this in my notes. As much as I write Jaden Ivey in my notes needs to stop taking so many threes, I write, man, I wish Marcus. I feel like you can tell in his body language he doesn't like and have as much confidence off the catch and shoot as he does off the dribble. I don't mind his off the dribble threes. I just want to see more catch and shoot. And maybe this is a me thing. Maybe I didn't realize exactly what the Pistons were drafting when they took Marcus Sasser. I don't mind how much he plays with the ball at times. I just wish some of it correlated to more open shots for his teammates. And I wish there was a little bit more catch and shoot, but like he's made shots. Like as a rookie, he has made shots. So
yeah, and I've bitched it on here before, but I also just feel like Sasser hasn't really been put in the right positions, just because there's been so many lineups where he's been like the lone ball handler. Yeah, and it's just like I just don't think there should be a lineup where he's your lone ball handler. Like that's been one of the things I've not been able to solve all season. Is why is that the case? I don't understand.
All right, Wes, let's go ahead and do the last one. We can get to it quick and answer that one.
All right. Bryce, I'll ask you this one first then. Sheet or Sham, both of Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey are top 20 in the NBA in total turnovers.
Total turnovers.
Yeah.
Sheet.
Yeah, you said Cade and Ivey combined top 20 in turnovers.
Well, each individually.
Individually, they are both top 20.
Oh, both top 20. Man. I'm gonna go. It is not average. It's total.
Total.
Yeah.
I think total makes it. Sheet.
So it is Sheed. Cade is 10th in the league. He's got a 2.2 assist to turnover ratio. Jaden Ivey is 18th. He's got a 1.5 assist to 1 assist to turnover ratio. And then just, for fun, sorry about all my dogs in the background.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
But just for maybe not fun, but Jalen Duren's actually 3rd on the team in total turnovers, 1.2 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. Yeah. Well, so not awesome.
I know at one point Sam had actually looked up if you put like usage percentages under a certain and then turnover percentages over, like actually Jalen and Asar were both in like a category that I don't remember what the exact numbers were. I continue to put this in my notes, Omari, as well. Like, yes, Cade and Ivey have to figure out their turnovers. You can't have all these other quote unquote role players turning the ball over as much as they do. Like I know some people like James Wiseman has at least 2 offensive fouls every game that just cannot happen. You can't have, and then one game it's Fournier, and then one game it's Flynn, and then another games it's, whatever. Like those guys can't be turning the ball over multiple times in a game. And so it's not just Cade and Ivey. Like those guys have to take care of their business as well, but these other guys can't be turning the ball over the way they have.
Yeah, it's funny. We talked so much like the first half of the season about Monte Morris just filling this key role as like the safety blanket, and then we saw him for like 2 games, and then he gets shaded. It still feels like this team needs a Monte Morris. Like this team just needs somebody who can just set the table, calm everybody down, and maybe that'll be an offseason priority.
You know what Monte Morris is doing for the Timberwolves, Omari? He's shooting 42% from 3. He has 44 assists. Guess how many turnovers Monte Morris has in 16 games with the Timberwolves?
Like 4, right?
3.
Three
turnovers. Now, like he's not playing a ton of minutes a game, right? Like he's playing 16 minutes a night for the Timberwolves. But that's exactly what I thought they were getting. 42% from 3, 44 assists to 3 turnovers.
All they needed.
We just never saw it materialize.
Never saw it.
All right, Wes, we appreciate you. Let everybody know, because I don't know if I always like give all the right things for the pin down and where they can listen to you and Blake and all of that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, you did, right? So we're live on YouTube. You could also watch that on Twitter. We usually record Thursdays at 6. And then anywhere that you listen to podcasts as well, you can find it. This week, we're going to have Jack Kelly join us. So pretty pumped about that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. You guys should tune in. Do it like a live mailbag show.
Sweet.
Wes, always a pleasure. We'll definitely get you back on very soon, especially now that it's pretty much the off season. It pretty much is the off season, but we have 2 episodes left before the season.
I say not very many.
1 maybe. Yeah, we're almost there, everybody. We are very, very close. Thank you for tuning in. I will get Bryce back for Sheed and Sham. Don't worry. I know you guys are all worried about that. Don't worry. I got you. We'll figure that out. I'll go ahead and close this out. So big thanks as always to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and our executive producer, Anjanette Delgado, and our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford. And big shout out to Wes as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.